work, may not work. I feel good about it. That's all it is, just a feeling.
How do we overcome a crisis? When facing a crisis, the process of working through the situation stays the same. No matter if it's concerning the death of a loved one, a job loss, or a deadly pandemic. Because solving a crisis in one simple step is impossible, we split the problem into little pieces. Solving each smaller crisis is less overwhelming. During the pandemic, it was very interesting to see which minor crises crystallized themselves out to be overcome. There is an existing crisis management model by Hurst and Shepard, where the process of working through a problem is measured in 2 units. First in time, and second in the trust in ourselves to overcome the crisis. To successfully overcome a crisis, there are 8 different stages, or small crises, that have to be faced. Phase 1. The hunch. Before a crisis presents itself, we have a gut feeling that something is approaching. At this time we ask ourselves, how would this situation, were it to happen, affect me? For a lot of countries, the COVID-19 pandemic was an expected crisis, and there was a period of waiting for the virus to cross borders and start spreading more and more. While many people couldn't imagine what a pandemic might look like, others didn't hesitate to start stocking up on non-perishable foods and other necessities. This resulted in a wave of hoarding. But one item seemed to disappear out of the shelves faster than all the others. This was the beginning of the toilet paper crisis. The toilet paper crisis. While toilet paper is not a product vital for survival, this trend in sales showed us that even in unpredictable times, we try to cling to the status we are used to. And suddenly seeing empty shelves makes us anxious and more likely to fall into herd mentality. When all my neighbors buy tons of toilet paper, they must have some reason. Phase 2. The shock. With the certainty comes the shock. We know that we are in the middle of a crisis and have to figure out how to handle our feelings. Reactions, while in the state of shock, can vary enormously, and the whole spectrum of feelings can be observed in action. 2 feelings that we are not really used to had a huge rise during the pandemic. On the one hand, there was a sudden sense of vulnerability, and on the other, we could observe a lot of solidarity. The "we are all in this together but we might die" crisis. In a time of incredible health, it was shocking to a lot of people that a simple virus could pose a real risk to their lives. This made them suddenly be aware of how fleeting life can be. Furthermore, having the entire world face the same threat also spiked a surge in solidarity in the fight against a common enemy, and appreciation for healthcare and other essential workers. Phase 3. The denial. Trying to work one's way out of the state of shock can often result in going over into a state of denial. We can't accept what has happened and try to convince ourselves, with varying success, that everything is normal. Being in denial can be very harmful to oneself and one's surrounding. This was, and in some cases still is, very prominent during the pandemic. Lots of people, as well as some governments, refused to accept that COVID-19 was a danger to the common health. And as we can see, for example in the case of the US, a lot of human lives were lost due to the denial. But denial can also be observed in harmless activities, and may help to deal with the stress that can be overpowering during a crisis. The distraction by sourdough crisis. One of the most explosive trends, especially on social media, was a surge in baking and cooking in general, or making homemade sourdough bread. This gave people an activity to fill their long day at home, tune out the world, and also a sense of control over a small thing. Additionally, having baked goods reminds a lot of people of happy and special occasions. A cupcake might help trick your brain into thinking that everything is okay. Phase 4. The anger and defense. Trying to work through a crisis affects our deepest feelings. Not having one specific person to blame for the crisis can be frustrating and result in the search for a random scapegoat. A lot of people simply turn to the decision-making group or person in power for criticism. In this stage, we are also very vulnerable to get sucked into the rabbit hole of fake news. The protest crises. Black Lives Matter. There was the Black Lives Matter movement. It started up again in the USA during the pandemic and sparked a global conversation about racism. The start might have been the murder of George Floyd, but his case was just the last straw. After facing institutional racism for decades, while being told that equality was reached, African Americans are now affected at a proportionally higher rate by COVID-19. A possible explanation might be that they are less likely to have health insurance or the ability to stop working and miss a paycheck. Conspiracy theories. In general, we are more likely to share news online with others when we are emotionally impacted by them, either to pass on joy, if it is something good, or unburden ourselves from it, if not. Therefore, a pandemic, which leaves us all scared and feeling vulnerable, is of course a topic that we all are very invested in. But, having a lot of false facts spread, sometimes even by very powerful people like the US president, during a pandemic, is extremely dangerous. Because believing conspiracy theories that are untrue actually results in fewer steps being taken to protect oneself against the disease. Protests against wearing masks is one very concerning example. Phase 5. The resignation. When we face a crisis, sometimes the whole situation seems hopeless. Resignation starts to set in, and we don't trust our own abilities anymore to overcome this. Accepting tips and help can be hard. Facing a second, and in some countries a third wave of infections, results in some people feeling like there is no way we can get through this crisis. Not leaving the house is sometimes adding to some lifestyle and appearance changes. Presenting the new look, quarantine trim and quarantine beard. The wild hair crisis. Getting drastic hair changes, like bangs, is a trend that resurfaces all the time. But, when getting a professional haircut is not an option, a lot of people result in just doing it themselves, with mixed results. But with the prospect of not leaving the house for weeks to come, we are much more likely to try out new hairstyles. Additionally, the quarantine beard has made first appearances. Because it feels like the perfect moment to just let things happen, sit back and let your beard grow. There are 3 stages left that mark important points when working through a crisis. Stage 6, the farewell to the old. Stage 7, the new hope and energy. And Stage 8, the self-confidence. In these stages, we learn that there is a new normal, and that we should let go of the past. We create new goals, and strive to build a better future. Once we have gained back our self-confidence, the crisis is overcome. To reach this end, we have to work through the various small crises at our own speed first. Since COVID-19 has come and went in waves, a lot of countries, and people in general, are at different stages, trying to deal with the pandemic right now. There were a few trends with great potential, and a few with great risk, when we think of the future. What trends should we try and continue? and what trends will continue, even if they pose danger to the society we currently live in. The world's economies have suffered a lot, and millions of people will have to face financial difficulties, even after there is a vaccine for the virus. Poverty and unemployment is in close correlation to domestic violence and other crimes. We also will have to deal with the rise in fake news that is currently on a very worrying path. Trends with great potential to keep in mind are certainly the newfound solidarity with each other and appreciation for essential workers. Just as important is keeping the conversation about big topics like Black Lives Matter going, and recognizing the people most affected by a global crisis. So, how do we overcome a crisis? We will do it one crisis at a time.